I have sat on this bench for over 30 years. I have seen the worst of humanity walk through those doors. I have seen liars, cheaters, manipulators, and predators disguise themselves in expensive suits and rehearsed smiles. But every once in a while, every once in a great while, someone walks into my courtroom who restores my faith in the human spirit. Someone who didn't ask for the fight. Someone who didn't deserve the pain. Someone who stood up when the entire world told her to sit down and stay quiet. This is one of those cases, and I promise you, by the time I'm done telling you what happened, you will never forget this woman's name. But before I get to the verdict, before I tell you how this all ended, you need to understand how it all began. Because trust me, what happened next changed everything. Let me take you back. Let me set the scene for you properly, because context matters in every case. Context is the difference between justice and injustice, between truth and assumption. This case came to me on what I thought would be an ordinary Tuesday morning. The docket was full. The courtroom was buzzing with that low, anxious murmur you always hear before proceedings begin, attorneys shuffling papers, families whispering prayers, reporters clicking their pens. I had already reviewed the preliminary filings the night before, and honestly, I thought I knew what I was walking into. A civil dispute, a disagreement, maybe a broken contract or a custody arrangement gone sideways. I was wrong. I was dead wrong. When I opened that case file, when I really read the details, I realized this was no ordinary dispute. This was a story about betrayal at the deepest human level. This was about a woman who had given everything, her time, her energy, her love, her money, her trust, to people who did not deserve a single ounce of it. And instead of breaking, instead of crumbling under the weight of what was done to her, she stood up, she fought back, and she did it the right way, through the law, through evidence, through the truth. Let me introduce you to the people involved. First, there was the plaintiff, the woman at the center of this entire storm. I will tell you right now, when she walked into my courtroom for the first time, she did not look like someone who had been through hell. She was composed. She was dignified. Her back was straight. Her eyes were clear, and she carried herself with the kind of quiet strength that you cannot fake. You cannot rehearse that. That kind of composure comes from deep within, from a person who knows they are on the right side of history and is willing to wait for the world to catch up. She was a working woman, a professional, someone who had built her life brick by brick from the ground up, without shortcuts, without handouts, without anyone handing her anything on a silver platter. She had worked multiple jobs in her 20s. She had put herself through school. She had saved every dollar, invested wisely, and created a stable, respectable life for herself and her family. She was the kind of person who neighbors trusted, who colleagues admired, and who friends turned to in times of crisis. She was a pillar, an anchor, the kind of woman who holds everything together while everyone else falls apart. And then there were the defendants. Now, I'm going to be very careful here because as a judge, I believe in due process. I believe in hearing every side, but I also believe in calling things what they are. And what the defendants did in this case was nothing short of calculated, deliberate, and deeply personal destruction. There were two primary defendants. One was someone this woman had trusted implicitly, a close associate, someone she had welcomed into her inner circle, someone she had confided in during vulnerable moments. The other was a figure operating more in the background, pulling strings, manipulating paperwork, creating a web of deception so intricate that it took months to untangle. Together, these two individuals orchestrated a scheme that was designed to do one thing and one thing only: take everything this woman had built and leave her with nothing. And for a while, for a painful, devastating while, it almost worked. Let me walk you through this carefully, because the devil, as they say, is always in the details. It started small. It always starts small, doesn't it? That's how the most dangerous betrayals work. They don't announce themselves. They don't come crashing through the front door. No, they creep in through the cracks. They whisper. They smile. They say all the right things while doing all the wrong things behind your back. The first sign, the very first red flag, came in the form of a financial discrepancy, a small one, So small that most people would have overlooked it entirely. A few $100s missing from a joint account, a transaction that didn't quite match the records, a receipt that appeared altered, tiny things, insignificant things, the kind of things you brush off because you trust the person sitting across from you at the dinner table. But this woman, and this is what makes her extraordinary, she didn't brush it off. Something in her gut told her that something was wrong. And let me tell you something I've learned in 30 years of sitting on this bench. Intuition is not magic. Intuition is your subconscious mind processing information faster than your conscious mind can articulate it. Her brain was picking up on patterns, on inconsistencies, on micro-expressions and half-truths that didn't quite add up. And instead of ignoring that feeling, instead of telling herself she was being paranoid or crazy, which, by the way, is exactly what the defendants wanted her to think, she started paying attention. She started keeping records, quietly, carefully, methodically. She didn't confront anyone. She didn't make accusations. She didn't storm into a room and demand answers. No. She understood something that many people in her situation fail to grasp. When you're dealing with people who are willing to deceive you, confrontation without evidence is useless. It only gives them time to cover their tracks. It only gives them warning. So she watched, she documented, she collected. Over the next several weeks, the discrepancies grew. What started as hundreds became thousands. Financial documents were being altered. Signatures were being forged. Assets that belonged to her, assets she had spent years accumulating, were being quietly, systematically transferred. Money was being rerouted through accounts she had never seen. Paperwork was being filed with agencies and institutions without her knowledge or consent. And here's what made it so insidious. It was all being done under the guise of helping her. The primary defendant, the one she trusted, had positioned themselves as someone who was taking care of things for her, managing her finances, handling her paperwork, streamlining her affairs. Every meeting, every conversation, every interaction was wrapped in the language of care and concern. Don't worry about it. I've got it handled. You're so busy. Let me take care of this for you. Trust me, I would never do anything to hurt you. Those words, those exact words were used as weapons. Trust was not just broken in this case, it was weaponized. And in that moment, in that slow, sickening realization, something inside this woman shifted, not broke, shifted. She went from being a victim to being an investigator. She went from being deceived to being determined. And that determination, that fire, that is what ultimately brought us all into this courtroom. Now, every case has a turning point. Every story has that one moment where the ground shifts beneath your feet and nothing is ever the same again. In this case, that moment came on a cold Wednesday evening. She had been reviewing bank statements, her own, the ones she had quietly obtained through proper legal channels. And there, buried on page 14 of a transaction report, she found it. A transfer, a large one, 6 figures, moved from an account bearing her name to an offshore entity she had never heard of. The authorization signature, hers, except it wasn't hers. She knew her own handwriting. She knew her own signature. And the one on that document was close, disturbingly close, but it was not hers. Someone had forged her signature to steal her money. Let me say that again, because I want it to sink in. Someone she trusted had forged her signature and stolen a 6-figure sum from an account she had spent years building. In that moment, something didn't feel right. In that moment, everything became terrifyingly clear. She didn't panic. She didn't cry. Not yet. She picked up the phone and called an attorney. And not just any attorney. She called someone who specialized in financial fraud, someone who knew how to follow the money, someone who understood that cases like this are won not with emotion, but with evidence. And from there, the truth began to unfold. The investigation that followed was painstaking. It took weeks of forensic accounting. It took subpoenas and depositions. It took digital forensics experts examining metadata on documents, verifying timestamps, tracing IP addresses. Every single thread was pulled, and every single thread led back to the same place, to the defendants. The scope of the fraud was staggering. We're not talking about a single incident. We're talking about a systematic, prolonged campaign of financial exploitation that spanned months. Multiple accounts had been compromised. Multiple documents had been forged. Multiple transfers had been executed. The total amount? I'll share that with you shortly. But first, I need you to understand something about the woman who brought this case before me. She could have settled quietly. She could have taken a deal, recovered some of her losses, and walked away. The defendant's attorneys actually offered that, a private settlement, sealed records, no public disclosure. It would have been easier. It would have been faster. It would have been safer. She said no. She said no because this was never just about the money for her. This was about accountability. This was about making sure that what happened to her could never happen to someone else. This was about standing in front of a judge, standing in front of me, and saying, "This is wrong, and I want the world to know it." That takes courage. That takes a kind of moral fortitude that I rarely see in this courtroom, and I respected her for it from the very first moment she took the stand. Now, let me put on my analytical hat for a moment, because this is where the case gets truly fascinating from a legal standpoint. When I examined the evidence, all of it, every document, every testimony, every digital record, several things stood out to me immediately. First, the level of premeditation. This was not an impulsive act. This was not someone making a desperate decision in a moment of weakness. This was planned, carefully, methodically, coldly planned. The defendants had spent time studying this woman's financial habits, her account structures, her signature patterns, her schedule. They knew when she was busy. They knew when she was distracted. They exploited her trust and her generosity like a lockpick exploits the tumblers in a lock. Second, the sophistication of the cover-up. These were not amateurs. The forged documents were convincing. The shell accounts were layered. The paper trail was deliberately convoluted, designed to confuse and exhaust anyone who tried to follow it. If this woman had not been as meticulous, as intelligent, as persistent as she was, this fraud might never have been discovered. That thought haunts me. How many others have been victimized by similar schemes and never found out? How many people are sitting right now trusting someone who is quietly draining their life savings? Third, and this is what bothered me the most, the psychological manipulation, the gaslighting, the way the defendants made this woman question her own memory, her own judgment, her own sanity. When she first raised concerns, early on before she had the full picture, she was told she was overreacting. She was told she was confused. She was told the numbers were fine, that she just didn't understand the accounting. They made her feel stupid for being smart. They made her feel paranoid for being perceptive. And that, in my opinion, is one of the cruelest forms of abuse there is. I've seen this pattern before. I've seen it in domestic cases, in corporate fraud cases, in elder abuse cases. The playbook is always the same. Isolate the victim, undermine their confidence, control the narrative, and make them dependent on the very person who is destroying them. But here's where this woman defied every expectation. She did not become dependent. She did not lose confidence. She trusted her own mind. She trusted her own instincts. And she built a case so airtight, so meticulously documented, that when it landed on my desk, there was no ambiguity. There was no gray area. There was only the truth, laid bare in black and white. But wait, because this story is not done, not even close. Just when I thought I had a full understanding of the case, a new piece of evidence emerged during the trial proceedings, something no one, not the plaintiff, not her attorneys, not even the defendants, expected. A third party came forward, a whistleblower, someone who had been tangentially involved in the defendant's scheme and had grown a conscience. This individual provided documentation, internal communications, emails, text messages that revealed the true extent of the conspiracy. It wasn't just about this one woman. The defendants had targeted others. At least 3 other individuals had been subjected to similar financial manipulation, though none of them had yet realized it. The courtroom went silent when this testimony was presented. I mean silent. You could hear the ventilation system humming. You could hear the court reporter's fingers hovering above the keys. Everyone was frozen. The defendant's lead attorney tried to object, tried to challenge the admissibility of the evidence, tried to discredit the whistleblower, but the documentation was verified. The metadata was clean. The timestamps matched. The evidence was irrefutable. And in that moment, The defendants' facade crumbled. You could see it in their faces. That slow, sick realization that the game was over, that the lies they had so carefully constructed were collapsing in real time in a public courtroom on the record. The woman, the plaintiff, sat perfectly still throughout all of this. She didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She didn't celebrate. She simply sat there, composed and dignified, the same way she had walked in on the first day. And I thought to myself, that is strength. That is grace under fire. That is someone who doesn't need revenge because she has something better. She has the truth. The climax of this trial came during closing arguments. The plaintiff's attorney delivered a statement that I will carry with me for the rest of my career. He stood before the courtroom, looked directly at the jury, and then at me, and said, "Your Honor, this case is not complicated. It is painful. Yes, it is infuriating. Yes, but it is not complicated. A woman worked hard. She played by the rules. She trusted the people around her. And those people, the very people she trusted most, took advantage of that trust in the most calculated, heartless way imaginable. They stole her money. They forged her name. They lied to her face. And when she started to figure it out, they tried to make her believe she was losing her mind." He paused. "But she wasn't losing her mind. She was using it. And that is why we are here today." The courtroom erupted. Not in applause. That's not allowed. But in that low, rumbling murmur of recognition. People nodding. People wiping their eyes. People looking at this woman with a kind of awe that transcends legal proceedings. I had to take a recess, not because the court required it, but because I needed a moment. I needed to collect myself, because in 30 years I have trained myself to be impartial, to be dispassionate, to weigh evidence without emotion. But there are moments, rare, sacred moments, when a case reaches through the bench and grabs you by the heart. This was one of those moments. When I returned to the bench, I was ready. I had reviewed every piece of evidence. I had considered every argument. I had weighed every testimony, and my decision was clear. I found in favor of the plaintiff, fully and unequivocally. The defendants were held liable on all counts: financial fraud, forgery, breach of fiduciary duty, intentional infliction of emotional distress. The total restitution ordered was substantial, every cent that had been stolen, plus damages, plus legal fees. I also referred the case to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution, because what happened here was not just a civil matter, it was a crime. But beyond the legal technicalities, beyond the dollar amounts and the statutory provisions, I wanted to say something to this woman directly, and I did, on the record. I looked at her from the bench and I said, "Ma'am, in my 30 years on this bench, I have seen countless individuals walk through these doors seeking justice. Some deserve it, some don't. But you are the embodiment of what this system was designed to protect. You are intelligent, you are resilient, you are courageous. You did not allow fear to silence you. You did not allow manipulation to define you. You stood up, you spoke the truth, and you let the evidence do the talking. This court honors you for that. I honor you for that." She looked at me. And for the first time in the entire trial, the first time, I saw her eyes fill with tears. Not tears of sadness, not tears of anger, tears of relief, the kind of tears that come when you have been carrying something impossibly heavy for an impossibly long time, and someone finally says, "You can put it down now. You're safe." She nodded, just once, quietly, and she whispered 2 words, "Thank you." That moment, that single quiet moment, was louder than any verdict I have ever delivered. So let me leave you with this. This case reminded me why I became a judge. Not for the power, not for the title, not for the gavel. I became a judge because I believe deeply, fundamentally, in my bones, that truth matters, that accountability matters, that when someone wrongs you, there should be a place you can go, a system you can trust, a voice that will listen. This woman found that place. This woman used that system, and this woman's voice was heard. But here's what I want you, all of you watching this right now, to take away from this story. Pay attention to the details of your own life. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Don't let anyone, no matter how close they are to you, no matter how much you love them, no matter how convincing their words sound, make you doubt what you know to be true. Your mind is your greatest weapon. Your integrity is your greatest shield, and your willingness to fight for what's right, even when it's terrifying, even when it's exhausting, even when the whole world tells you to give up. That is what separates the extraordinary from the ordinary. This woman was extraordinary, and I was honored, truly, deeply honored, to preside over her case. Court is adjourned. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it made you feel something, share it. Because stories like this don't just deserve to be heard, they deserve to be remembered. And if you're going through something similar, if you're being manipulated, deceived, taken advantage of, know this: the truth always surfaces. Always. It may take time, it may take patience, it may take more courage than you think you have, but it surfaces. And when it does, justice follows. I've seen it from this bench thousands of times, and I saw it again today.